911 operators, what is that one call that you could never forget? Harley motorcycle tipped over and the clutch lever went into a 4-year-old's eye. Parent was on the line asking what to do. Suddenly, she said, "They're going off the motorcycle." I emphatically told her to tell them to stop and wait for rescue, and EMS rescue ended up cutting off the clutch lever and transporting the kid to hospital. She underwent surgery. That was 1982. Just last year, I met the lead rescue officer and the girl herself, now fully grown. They wanted to meet the 911 operator that saved her vision. I had a call that started out pretty dumb, but was actually pretty serious. 911, where is your emergency? 123 Main Street. Okay, what's going on there? I'd like to order a pizza for delivery. Oh great, another prank call. Ma'am, you've reached 911. Yeah, I know. Can I have a large with half pepperoni, half mushroom and peppers? I'm sorry, you know you've called 911 right? Yeah, do you know how long it will be? Okay, ma'am, is everything okay over there? Do you have an emergency? Yes, I do. And you can't talk about it because there's someone in the room with you? Moment of realization. Yes, that's correct. Do you know how long it will be? I have an officer about a mile from your location. Are there any weapons in your house? Nope. Can you stay on the phone with me? Nope. See you soon, thanks. As we dispatch the call, I check the history at the address and see there are multiple previous domestic violence calls. The officer arrives and finds a couple. Female was kind of banged up and boyfriend was drunk. Officer arrests him after she explains that the boyfriend had been beating her for a while. I thought she was pretty clever to use that trick. Definitely one of the most memorable calls. My first call I ever had to dispatch on the radio. 2 homeless dudes blowing each other on the bus. I'm sorry it's not serious or traumatic, but it will always stay with me. I was a 911 dispatcher for several years, and one of my most memorable calls was a hysterical woman at about midnight. One stormy night. She was absolutely incomprehensible. I kept saying, "Ma'am, you have to calm down. I can't understand you, ma'am." This went on for what felt like forever. I couldn't get anything useful out of her. My officers were en route to this obviously horrifying situation. Finally, she said something about being with her sister. "How old is your sister?" 1. Instantly suspicious, I asked, "How old are you?" 5. A 5-year-old boy. So that's how I inadvertently called a little boy ma'am many times. Oops. The storm had woken him up, and his parents were gone. They went out to move their cars, to shelter in case of hail. He was just very scared. My officer still responded and talked to the parents about not leaving sleeping children alone, but everybody was unscathed. It wasn't my most tragic call, but it is one I've never forgotten. Poor little ma'am. I used to work as a relay operator, 711, and often got misdialed 911 calls. We would connect them to 911, but since they connected through us, we had to stay on the line. One time I got an old woman who fell out of bed and couldn't get up. I connected her to 911, and from there they tracked her location. The 911 operator is like, "Ma'am, are you in such and such hospital? Are you calling from the hospital?" "Yes, I fell and no one will help me." Not sure what the 911 operator did, but about 10 minutes later you hear someone come into her room to help her up. Apparently this woman fell out of her hospital bed and no one noticed for over an hour until she dragged herself to the phone and called 911. I was like, note to self, never go to this hospital. 911 dispatcher here. I took a call once of a house being on fire. So of course we send fire department out. Soon as they arrive on scene they ask for the police to respond. Police don't typically respond to this area with FD. Turns out the story was that a girl's fiance arrives home and dumps gas on her and lights her in fire. She then runs to the shower to try to put herself out. He follows her, turns the shower off, dumps more gas on her, and lights her back on fire. She then runs through the house, thereby lighting the house on fire. She then runs out of the house as FD arrives on scene. So when FD pulled up they had arrived to a body collapsed in the yard on fire. When PD arrives, the male fiancé walks out of the burning house, lets himself into the back of a police car and says, "Take me to jail." My mom was a 911 dispatcher for over 30 years. She had many crazy calls, but one story she told me always stuck out from the rest. One day a man called in. With a calm voice he told my mom he was in the local hotel, and that he had doused himself with gasoline, and was going to kill himself. He called in, so they could evacuate the hotel, because I don't want to hurt anyone else. While my mom is trying to talk him out of it, she is on another line to the hotel letting them know what's going on, and to get everyone out. While emergency services are en route, she has to stay on the line, whenever possible, to keep people calm, reassure them help is on the way, and to try her best to keep track of what's up on the other end. As soon as the guy heard the sirens coming in the distance, he asked her if everyone had been evacuated yet. She tried to stall her answer, thinking he'd light himself up as soon as she said yes. Didn't work. Seconds later she stated hearing the worst scream she's ever heard, and she's heard many during that job over the years, and then the phone went static. And then silence. He died in that hotel and mom had to listen. Lousy day. My wife wakes up crying once and a while after dreaming about certain of her calls. It's always either mommy won't wake up or I backed over my boy. She has not been on the job for 15 years. Some things just leave marks. The one that stayed with me gave childbirth instructions to a deaf father via relay for his deaf wife. They were the victims of a home invasion and were tied to chairs. Burglars saw her in labor, panicked, then left. Took dad hours to free himself and call. While giving the instructions, I obtained a suspect description to put out to surrounding agencies. They were caught in the city to our north during the call. Baby boy was born perfectly healthy. Edit. Obligatory thank you for the gold. Former Sheriff's Department dispatcher in charge of non-emergency and 911 calls for a rural southern county. I picked up the job part-time and was in the process of training. My supervisor was sitting next to me listening to my end of the call, but she was not hooked into the line to hear the whole call. Line rings. I answer. It's 911. A young girl, less than 10 years old, is telling me that she, her mother, and her baby sibling are locked in a bedroom. Her uncle is pacing around outside the door holding a knife and threatening to kill them all. She does not know the house number/fire number where they are, and mom has basically checked out of the conversation out of fear. I have a vague idea of where she is, so I send deputies in her direction with the promise that I will get better directions. As is typical in rural areas, everybody owned a scanner and listened like it was their job. My phone starts ringing off the hook. So I'm reassuring this little girl on one handset and holding a second handset up to my other ear, taking directions from concerned members of the public. Directions like, go until you see a broke down truck. Keep going. When you get to the second broke down truck, turn right and continue until you see a large rock. It was also late enough in the evening that everything was dark out. The little girl tells me there might be a back door that is unlocked. Members of the public who know the house just from the general location and number/gender of occupants are calling in confirming that there is a back door that my deputy should enter through and that they will not be seen by the perpetrator if he has retreated to the living room. My guys arrive, sneak in the back, walk right up to the guy sitting in a recliner, disarm him, and arrest him. Family gets emergency protective orders so he, ideally, cannot be a threat to them again. I almost quit after that call because my adrenaline was running, I was shaking, and I'd had to handle it mostly myself because my supervisor couldn't hear what was going on. I stayed with it, and it was one of the best jobs I had. I quit when I moved to another state, but it was a sad decision to make. Edit. I would like to add that the whole not being able to find your house in the country thing was extremely common back then, and I cannot speak to current systems in rural areas. I also got extensive public help via scanner listeners the time a home security company called to report a possible break-in or medical emergency, but they only had a billing address on file. No directions to the house whatsoever. If you have any kind of company servicing your home, make sure they have your actual street address/fire number and a backup, detailed set of directions to your home including landmarks. I don't want to ever see anyone in an easily preventable emergency because ADP doesn't have the details necessary to send someone to your home. I'm a 911 operator. My favorite call I have personally took, that I won't forget, is about a couple at McDonald's. They had just purchased a new vehicle and went out to celebrate the purchase at a local McDonald's. The wife for some reason decided she had better check the spare tire and make sure they had one before they left town, and found a gun instead. I received a call from the wife stating she just accidentally shot her husband. When I was asking about exit wounds, she said it did not penetrate but burned him real badly. Turns out wife shot the husband with a flare gun when she went to show it to him. They did not finish their Big Macs, and I'm not sure how that marriage ended up. He wasn't a happy man on the way to the emergency room to get burn treatment. Before my grandma died, we had to call 911 to get her to the hospital. An older lady, for some reason still an EMT or first responder, I forgot, came to the house. She had trouble getting up all the stairs to the front door and fell backwards. She thought she hit her head, so she touched it and saw blood all over her palm. In reality she just scraped her hands, but thought the blood was from her head, so she fainted. We had to call another ambulance. Actual 911 operator here for a major North American city. Throwaway for privacy issues. Also, I can't go into great detail. Worst 2 calls I've ever taken have both been callers who committed suicide while on the phone with me. First was a female who jumped from her apartment balcony while on the phone with me. I heard her scream the whole way down, and I heard her hit the ground. I still have nightmares of just the sound of her screaming and hitting the ground. Second was a male who hung himself while talking to me. He said he didn't want to be by himself when he did it, so he called 911. He apologized for what he was about to do, but he wouldn't tell me where he was. We never got to him on time. I had to sit there with an open line and him hanging until the police finally located where he was. You know that sound in the movies you hear when someone has hung themselves. You know, the sound of the body hanging from the rope and somewhat swinging back and forth. That creaking sound the rope makes from rubbing against whatever it's tied to? Yeah, I had to listen to that sound for quite some time before he stopped swinging. To this day I can't watch a scene in a movie where someone has hung themselves without having a mini anxiety attack and almost throwing up. I've thrown up a few times soon after it had happened. Not 911 operator, but grandma was telephone operator back in the day when operators actually connected calls. First call ever on first day on the job. Kid zipped his junk in his zipper, and this was back in the days of metal zippers. She said she could hear the kid screaming in the background. So she put it through to the fire department, because I figured they were all guys there, so they'd know what to do. Hi guys, I actually am a 911 operator. First ever 911 I answered was about a naked man sitting in a bathtub on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. He was drunk, and we still don't know where he got the tub. I have a couple, but the one that takes the cake so to speak is this one. So background, I worked in a very busy city, so shooting, raping, robberies etc. were not a novelty, but a norm unfortunately. We were used to it, and I have heard several people die with me on the phone. This lady though. So she calls and says, my husband has a gun to my head and won't leave him alone, you gotta come quick. She's screaming into the phone, then she puts it down. All I can hear at this point is her yelling at her husband, but I love you baby. Then boom. Gunshot. But I love you. Boom. Gunshot, something gobbled. But I love you. Boom. Gunshot. So at this point I'm standing up yelling into my little microphone, stop saying I love you. And everyone in the room with me now turns and looks at me like I have 5 heads. But I was caught up in the call. Turns out the man walked in on the woman and found another guy in the closet. Said guy ran out of the house, but the woman didn't make it out alive.